See where I put things I create at. Not for the Weaker Sex by David J. Rowbottom. Volume 11. How to be a unique generation. We've never had it so different. No generation in history has had to deal with faster social and domestic change than those born in the 60s and 70s. I am not for one moment belittling or underestimating the hardships and woes of earlier generations, or later. For thousands of years, Homo sapiens have had to deal with dreadful and heartbreaking issues. High infant mortality, disease, famine, war. Add to that insurmountable discrimination based on race, gender, class, politics, and sexual orientation, and you realize that the very fact of your own existence is a wonder. How on earth, writer's note, quite literally, did each and every one of your ancestors survive and make it possible for you to live in such a civilized and enlightened time? And there lies my argument. All previous generations could call on pre-previous generations for help and guidance during the terrible times. Social and domestic change happened at such a slow pace as to make it possible to have 1, 2, sometimes 3 generations in a family who could advise and aid you through choppy waters. Each generation had more or less the same problems and issues as the generation before. The 60s and 70s child has nothing, in a literal sense, to complain about. No world war, excellent healthcare, a diet so rich and abundant that in itself is now proving a problem. If you told the average man 100 years ago that people would be killing themselves by overeating, they would have thought you as mad, as if you'd said that a funny-looking little messenger in the Bavarian army would one day bring Europe to its knees and ruin a particular mustachioed look for the rest of time. Discrimination, although still surviving under breath, is openly frowned upon, and most governments have passed laws that carry heavy penalties for anyone found breaking them. So, nothing to worry about then. Excellent. I'll move on. Next volume, please. But wait a moment. Upon further and deeper investigation, this is untrue. Since the late 1970s, the world has witnessed an explosion in technologies and freedoms that hasn't been seen since UG, a Homo sapien, showed Ag, a Homo neanderthalensis, his new wheel thingy, just after they'd had a wonderful cross-species shag. New technology. The confusion of my particular generation started for me in 1978, when my dad came home from work one balmy summer's evening with a box under his arm. He put the box down on the dining table, walked over to the television, and with a flourish and quite a deal of effort, pushed the gargantuan chrome button on front of the Philips G22 K550 color TV and changed the channel from Chorlton and the Wheelies to the 6 o'clock news. Writer's note, the Philips G22 K550, a classic of our time. Writer's note, Chorlton and the Wheelies, a classic for all time. Bye-bye, little old lady. This, apart from the mysterious box, was a routine occurrence, so I was all moaned and groaned out and accepted the face of newsreader Richard Baker, as I would an old but very serious family member. I studied the new box from afar and could, with my youthful 2020th vision, make out words. Some words I knew. TV Master. Some were completely new to me. Binatone and Magnavox. There was a sentence full of familiar words, but in an order that made no sense. Plays on most sizes, most brands, black-white TV. Now, in the modern era, something playing on a TV seems very obvious. But back in the 1970s, playing on the TV meant getting out your toy soldiers, putting them on the top of the television, and, well, playing with them. To have something other than BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV staring back at you from the box in the corner of the room was, in 1978, as odd as a smartphone in today's world being capable of vacuuming your carpet. My father, being the perfect blend of adult authority and teaser of children, watched the news without a single glancing or vocal reference to this stationary box that fizzled with exciting wonderment on the table. "Set the table for tea, please," shouted Mum. "That was my job." I leapt up, knowing that in order to set the table for tea, I had to first clear the table of any and all detritus that had been flung on it as people returned from their respective day of toil. I get to touch the box, I thought. Where should I put this, Dad? I asked, with a slight tremble in my voice. Just bring it here, please, he answered with a monotonic tone. I'll be needing it later. This time his voice had a playful tone to it. A teasing tone. I couldn't bear it. I wondered how long tea took to complete. Why had I never timed this? All the years I'd been eating at tea time, and never once had it occurred to me to time the process. I guessed at half an hour. Could I wait half an hour? Stop daydreaming and set the table for tea, please, called out my slightly agitated mum from the kitchen. I snapped back into the moment and tidied everything, except the box from the table. Books and briefcase and school bags and pens. Each time I returned to the table, I got to study the box a little more. I found out that it was MKIV, another Binatone product, it said at the bottom. There had been others? At that time in my life, my grasp of Roman numerals was a little bit like my grasp of ladies' breasts. I knew of them, but couldn't really count over 2. After thinking for a while, I guessed that there had been 3 earlier versions of this thing. The picture on the box was magnificent. It resembled the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. Oh my God, what was it? It said it was an O1/4974. Was that good? With the flotsam and jetsam of the day cleared, I went back for the box. I lifted it carefully. Careful with that, said Dad, without breaking eye contact with Richard Baker. Whatever was residing inside the box shifted slightly as I lifted it. Oh no, I hoped I hadn't broken it. Writer's note. The simple sight of this box still sends thrills of excitement coursing through my body. A great British company, Binatone, was founded in 1958 by Gulu and Partap Lalvani to import and distribute consumer electronics. Writer's note. I feel a tip of the hat must also go to Alan Alcorn, far right, who developed the very first Pong game as a training exercise assigned to him by Nolan Bushnell, the co-founder of Atari. The genius who changed the life of millions of children. Thank you, Al, from us all. I took it over to Dad, and with a glint in his eye, he took it from me and put it on the arm of his chair. He looked back at the TV where Jimmy Carter was shaking hands with someone. This was taking way too long. Writer's note, not unlike my current description of it. I needed to speed this up in the hope that my haste would somehow speed up the cooking and eating process. So I set the table in record time. Get the tablecloth from the drawer, spread it out on the table. Get the placemats. Run to the kitchen and get the knives, forks and spoons. Lay them out to the side of the placemats, condiments, teapot stand, milk jug, cups and saucers for Mum and Dad, glasses of orange cordial. Done, I shouted too loudly. Thanks, said Mum. Tea will be about half an hour. I stood agog. Half an hour? I waited agog. 30 minutes? I helped carry the plates to the table agog. Please, all of you, eat quickly. I ate agog. I gobbled it down so fast that I got hiccups and was told off by my mum. I drank agog. I gulped enormous amounts and spilled some down my shirt. I got told off again agog. I had a lovely mum-made jam roly-poly. Still delicious even under the agog circumstances. I watched as everyone else took their time eating the lovingly prepared meal. Agog! I sided the table. Agog! I got my money's worth out of the word agog. Agog! Inside I shouted, Aga! Ruddy hell! Writer's note. This was the closest my dad ever got to swearing so in my head. It was as close as his young son would get too. Outwardly I whimpered, agogly. Okay, said Dad with a smirk. Who wants to watch telly? No! What is in the box? Plessy! All right, he said. Now, how do I open this thing? There was a moment, as he prepared to open the box, that I honestly thought he was going to put on a white lab coat. Some of the mystique that Dad had built up trickled away as he struggled gamefully to set the thing up. There were no SCART sockets in those days, no HDMI, aux channels, USB ports, or video in RCA leads. This bad boy had to be put through the aerial socket and tuned in. Dad went through the tuning process 3 times, and all he found, other than the usual 3 channels and almost one Welsh version of BBC Two, was static noise from the Big Bang. Mum was dutifully sitting close by and casually scanning the instructions. She walked over to Dad and whispered something in his ear. It may have been a whisper of love and support for the marvelous effort he was expending, all in the name of making his nuclear family go atomic, but I think it was more of a technical suggestion. He leaned over to the Binatone control center and calmly, but with a frustrated look I hadn't seen before, turned it on. Lights appeared. The TV flickered. We waited. Agog! Nothing happened. Dad began to tune again, this time with the instructions firmly in his grasp. And then, there it was. Proof that my dad worked for NASA. Something other than TV. On the TV, we sat there aghast, breathless. Some might even say, agog. Our tea had thoroughly gone down by this point, so we played all night. We played tennis, at 8 we played football, up until we played squash. You could even play solo squash. We played all week. We set up leagues at this, we invited neighbours to watch. Dad lost track of the news. Tea stood cold and congealing. I forgot that Chorlton and the Wheelies even existed. I had become part of a lost generation. The game was fast. It was really fast. So fast as to make you think that no human alive would be able to turn the little knob fast enough or accurately enough to be able to play at full speed. Why, you asked yourself, would anybody make a setting so fast as to render the human being incapable of functioning? It seemed as ludicrous and pointless as having a setting on a toaster that burns bread into charcoal. And yet within a week we were playing this game at full speed, one-handed, while taking the piss out of Simon, your mate from number 4, who was struggling to play against you because his skill levels were languishing where yours had been only a week earlier. Until this momentous day, the most exciting game I had ever played was Mattel's Steer and Go. Writer's note: just look at the speed lines on the turning road. Just look at Simon's face. Just look as I coolly steer and go while holding the classic 3-spoke steering wheel between thumb and finger. Obviously this isn't Simon and me, but it's a fair representation. I remember this as a spectacularly thrilling game. It had a roadway that rotated. It had a wooden sports steering wheel. It had gears. It had a handbrake. The idea was to steer your car around the hilly landscape, but not to lose magnetic connection between your car and the driving magnet beneath the board. Its gears gave you 3 different speeds: slow for the amateur, medium for your nan, and fast for only the most daring. In 1977, it was living on the edge. In 1978, it was living in the loft. Arcades. Amusement arcades changed that year. No longer were they places where one watched low-denomination coins rattle and fall through glass cabinets with strategically placed nails to deviate and destroy any chance of success. No longer did one-armed bandits steal money more effectively than the 2-armed variety. No longer were they the domain of old people with unimpressive gambling issues and a jar of change. Now the younger generation took over. My generation. And now there was skill involved. If you had the time and the 10p coins, you could become a master of your chosen video game. The coup de grace, should you reach the heady heights of being the owner of the high score, even if only for the tiniest length of time, was being able to proudly insert your initials at the top of the leaderboard for all, including girls, to see. This, rather amazingly, did actually impress a certain kind of girl. Writer's note: the arcade groupie, contrary to what you may think, did exist. They weren't always the cream of the crop, so to speak, but they were generally up for a certain degree of indiscreet groping around the back of the arcade if you could fluke a high score while they were watching. There was none of this modern nonsense where it is possible to practice and perfect a particular game in the comfort of your cesspit of a bedroom before unleashing yourself onto the World Wide Web. You had to learn at the amusement arcade. I mean, you didn't have one of these things at home. Without your parents securing planning permission for a significant household extension, you couldn't have one of these things at home. Where would you put it? It was the size of a small family saloon car. Writer's note. I have no recollection why Phoenix became my game of choice. There were so many to choose from. Perhaps it was a byproduct of not wanting to simply watch others have all the fun anymore, and the only game available at that precise moment was Phoenix. Perhaps it was unfashionable enough to give me time to learn away from the glare of the more attractive teenage girls. Writer's note. The opening graphic was so exciting to see. Writer's note. This was where you were certain to die, unless you could whip a little finger over to the shield button and blast the evil birds with your green force field. You found the game that best suited you and had to improve in the open glare of the interested world. People gathered around to watch and laugh as you lost all your lives in the time it takes to say, "A pound's worth of 10 PS, please." But you got better. You rose through the ranks of high-score initials. You got to the amusement arcade as early as you could so your competitors couldn't hog the machine, sometimes even bunking off school to secure your place. You growled and hissed like a cat in the direction of anyone who was known to play the same game as you. You tolerated playing what you considered to be lesser games as you waited for your nemesis to finish. But unfortunately, they got better too, and so, much to your annoyance, played for longer each time. Sometimes it seemed like a lifetime. Then you were on. 10p in the slot. And you played, sometimes to an audience of up to 2 people. Now that, my friend, is pressure. Never mind pulling on the sporting jersey of your country. Forget performing open-heart surgery. Singing solo at Sydney Opera House. Landing a plane full of terrified passengers when the pilot and co-pilot have both been stricken with debilitating diseases. Nothing came close to this for nerve-jangling tension. Not even getting through to Noel Edmonds on Saturday morning's multicolored swap shop to offer your Binatone in exchange for a Commodore 64. There was absolutely no feeling like beating your closest rival. The experience of moving the joystick nonchalantly through the on-screen alphabet to find your 3-lettered moniker and then seeing it sit proudly on the top of the leaderboard was like no other in life. Writer's note, even to this day. It was even better when you knew that somewhere in the close vicinity was your nearest rival, watching you with hate in their heart and a warm 10p in their pocket. You were someone. You were also spiraling unknown toward living a qualification-free existence as an apprentice in some crappy backstreet engineering factory. But you were the best player of Phoenix within a 10-yard radius, and that meant everything to you. Divorce. Now I grant you that these are childish things about which I write. No generation of children has gone from being excited to bounce down the street on a giant orange ball with large antennae and a bizarrely scary painted face on it, to being able to sit alone in your living room and shoot Nazis with the help of a team of multinational nutters who are multi-age with multi-intelligence, with no clue what multi-grain even means. Writer's note. What? Who? Why? Oh, to have been a fly on the wall when Aquilino Cozzani unveiled his invention to the research development boys at Ledragoma head office. Nor has there been a group of adolescents who have had to learn to adapt from recording the top 40 on an old portable tape recorder off the radio, while the rest of the house sits in total silence, to downloading, burning, and converting myriads of different formats of music and uploading them onto a whole host of different players and smartphones and laptops and tablets. However, when we move away from childish things, we see that the humor and innocence of my point drifts gently into life-altering agonies and pains that have no tried and tested solutions that our parents and grandparents can help us with. Divorce, although always possible throughout the history of marriage, was a pretty rare occurrence. The kid at school whose parents were divorced was always looked upon as a one-off. It was unusual. It was very sad. It was hard to comprehend. It is now the norm. Couples are getting divorced because they can't decide what to watch on telly or don't like the way their partner spoke to them last Wednesday. There are, of course, huge advantages to this. People no longer have to tolerate or feel trapped in loveless or abusive marriages. But how can previous generations answer questions like, how do I meet new people at my age? How do I be a parent to another person's child? How do I continue to be a good parent to my kids now that I don't live with them? What do I do if my ex-partner is turning my children against me? Simply put, they probably can't. They can advise and suggest courses of action. They can offer their love and support. Unfortunately, however, these are relatively new phenomena, and therefore we are writing the rule book as we go along. If I had the answers, I'd tell you. If you have the answers, please share them. I suspect there are no answers yet. See where I put things I create at.